Good morning, CUT. How are you today? That is fantastic. I'm happy to be back home. Had a good time in Sacramento with the Unity of Sacramento family. I trust that I went out there and represented you all well. That's my main aim. So it's good to be back. Everybody good? You good? Balcony believers, you good? All right, that's Christ Universal Temple Ensemble, y'all. There's nothing like that on the planet. Temple musicians, help me say thank you. Mr. Martin Woods and Mr. Monte Pilon, Christ Universal Temple Ensemble. And so we're continuing this series, Signs Along the Road to Success. And as we explore our topic for today, I'm going to push the magic button here on my cell phone, and we will discover together, wink, wink, what our topic is for today. And so here we go. So no U-turn is our topic for today. Son? You have anything, son? All right, you good? All right, thank you. All right, she understands what it means to let a gentleman be a gentleman. Thank you, sweetie pie. Can't put it right there. See if we can find some place to, in the plant. I'm not sure those plants are the kind of plants that you can, So no U-turn is our sign for today. And as I'm sure many of you realize, the U-turn sign is a sign that indicates to us that we are not allowed to go backward, particularly along the place that you might be on that road. And so U-turns can be unsafe because there's traffic often on both sides. When you're trying to make a U-turn, one of the things that you have to be really conscious and intentional about doing is finding the place that allows you to rest before you begin to maneuver and make your way back. And so U-turns are just inherently dangerous. Sometimes U-turns are allowed, and not only are they allowed, but they're good. If we remember the gospel according to Luke, we find Jesus cleansing 10 lepers. And as the lepers leave from Jesus, there is one leper who remembers that he is healed, and that leper then makes a U-turn and comes back to say, "Thank you, God. Thank you that I am free." But most of us don't just go back to say, "Thank you, God." Most of us go back when we make a U-turn, we go back to those places for which we might not have some resolved all of the issues. And so for those of us who are considering making a U-turn, I want to focus on 3 areas that we ought not make a U-turn back to. Is that all right? And those 3 areas that that I want to encourage you to avoid making a U-turn back to is the area of fear. Say fear. Fear. Excuses. And problems from the past. The 3 areas I want to encourage you and challenge you not to make a U-turn back to are the areas of fear, excuses, and problems from the past. Doctors at Johns Hopkins did a study, and one of the things that they found in this study as they studied people who lived fear-filled lives, one of the things that they studied is that people who live fear-filled lives died quicker and much sooner than people who did not spend most of their lives worrying. And so it was surmised that we are inwardly constructed to have faith and not to live by fear. And so then, if this is the case, when we are living by fear, we are really living outside of the reality of God and all that is good. Fear is a common emotion. Most of us experience it. It's not all bad. There is something to be said for the fear that overcomes you when you are faced with a lion or a bear or a bad relationship or an experience that is too small for you. There is something to be said for the fear that tells you when it's time to run. But that's not the same as the fear that keeps you paralyzed in conditions that, again, are just beneath you. And so the kind of fear that we're talking about here is the fear that is unpleasant and is caused by the belief that something or someone can do something to you. The kind of fear that makes us believe that someone has power over us. You've heard me say it before, that it's done unto you as you believe. And many of us share some fears in common, the fear of failure, the fear of public speaking, the fear of intimacy and commitment, the fear of rejection, the fear of death, and even the fear of success. Those are not uncommon fears, those are very common fears. But I believe that when we take advantage of the opportunity to reframe what we're looking at, we give ourselves a new way of seeing. And so what if we just quickly thought to reframe just some of the most common fears, just the fear of failure, public speaking, intimacy and commitment, rejection, death, and fear of success. What if we just quickly, in a couple moments, just took an opportunity to reframe those few very common fears? So what if we took the fear of failure and we reframed it and we said to ourselves, you ain't doing it already, so what's the thing to be afraid of if you're already not doing the thing that you might fear? I want to point out to you that Google and Apple were started by amateurs and the Titanic was captained and built by professionals. So we ought not let fear of failure keep us from moving forward. Fear of public speaking is one of the major fears that most people experience. But how many of you in this room today said some words? I want to point out to you that you are right now in a public place. And in this public place, there are people. And while there might have only been 1 or 2 people listening to your conversation, you were having that conversation around hundreds of people. So it may not really be the fear of failure or public speaking that you're afraid of. Maybe it's just the fear of the context of standing in front of people and speaking to them. But let me give you this nugget also. Most people who come to hear you speak have a self-interest. They want a reward for the time they spent listening to you. So people who come to hear you speak want to hear you do well. You don't have to be afraid of public speaking. Fear of intimacy and commitment is a major fear for many of us. So let me just offer this to you, because what you might want to do is just love and be committed to yourself so thoroughly that people who come into your space might just from the overflow feel the commitment and the intimacy and the closeness that you have to yourself. If you love yourself enough, you don't have to worry about it. How about fear of rejection? You ever worried about somebody not wanting you? You know what I'm talking about? You ever felt like there was something that kept you from being enough? Let me apprise you of what they call the 18-40-60 rule. When we're 18 years old, we think that everybody is thinking about us. By the time we get to our 40s, we don't really care what people think. And when we get into our 60s and beyond, we learn that wasn't nobody thinking about you to begin with. And so you don't have to fear rejection if you already know that ain't nobody thinking about you to begin with. If you will accept you and God will accept you, that is more than enough. I just want to reframe it for us. You don't have to be afraid of dying. Everybody is going that way. But here's what I want to challenge you to do in the meantime. Spend your life climbing new mountains rather than sliding down old ones. Then there's always the fear of success. And you're not going to get it every time. You're going to make some mistakes. But I like the words of Les Brown, who said, when you are trying to accomplish something you've never done before and you fail, try to fall on your back. Because if you can look up, you can get up. Right? And so as we encounter this idea of fear, and I don't want to minimize it, I just want us to be able to think about fear in some very different kinds of ways so that we can move along this road to success and not be deterred by the fear and turn around and away from the destination just because there is some uncertainty. Right? For most of us, what we are afraid of is exaggerated many times over. And rarely is that which we are fearing as perilous as we imagine it to be. So feeling fear is often like being in a horror movie. The thrill and the suspense are riveting, but the threat is not. So more often than not, the greatest threats is in our head. And we are always safer than we think because we are always protected by the loving presence and power of God. And so when fear remains unidentified and unchallenged, these fears appear to be impossible to overcome. But you can't avoid the fear. What you must do is face and overcome the fear. See, sometimes the Lord calms the storm. And sometimes the Lord lets the storm rage and he calms you. Because if you can overcome your fear in one experience, you can overcome fear in all experiences. So what we must learn to do is be courageous enough to walk by faith and not by sight. Does that make sense? And so let me just quickly go through some things that are impressing upon us or trying to impress upon us when we are operating in fear. The first is that we have to, when we're facing fear, put this in your notes, when you are facing fear, be willing to face the facts. When you are facing fear, be willing to face the facts. Face what scares you head on. Don't twist it. Don't make it out to be more than it is. Face it head on. Call the thing a thing, because you do know, like I do, that you can't fix what you won't face. So face the fear head on. And then let me challenge you to do two things. Separate it into what you can control and what you can't. When you're facing fear, get a feel for whether or not it's something you have concern about or something you have influence over. If it's something that you're concerned about that you can't physically and with your own abilities do something about, then you have to let that go. If it's something you have influence over, then stop being afraid and move with some intention. Does that make sense? When you are facing the fear, separate the necessary concerns from the baseless fears. As I said, chances are that many of our fears are greatly exaggerated and unwarranted. Number 2, erase the negative imprints. This is good. Because most of what we fear is not based upon what's in front of us, it's based upon what we've been through. And so I'm afraid to move in course today because of something that didn't work out yesterday. Let me say it to you this way. I'm afraid to open my heart to a new experience to love because of what somebody did yesterday. But I want to challenge you and I want to encourage you to not hold your potential captive to your past. Right? What you have to be courageous enough to do, and I keep using this word courageous because it takes courage to not turn back around when God has set you on a path. I love the song, I can hear it in my ears, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. It takes some courage to walk faithfully when you can't see where exactly it is you're going. And so sometimes we retreat to the comfort of the known. And that makes us comfortable, but it doesn't give us the progress that we need to overcome the challenge that's in front of you. See, sometimes you go through stuff not because of who you are, but because of who you have to become. Right? Sometimes you go through things that make you a person worth being. And so your past experiences, whether you realize it or not, they have prepared you for the challenge that's in front of you. But if you will not confront the negative imprints, you will let negative experiences from your past dictate what happens in your future. And what happens every time we do that is we create a new imprint of an old experience. And so most of us think we're acting, but we're not acting, we're reacting. And when we set ourselves into a cycle of reacting by making this U-turn, when I make this U-turn to a reaction that I already know, how many of you know that a reaction is not a new action, it's an old action reenacted? So when I make this U-turn to back to where I've been, the more consistently I make a U-turn, the more consistently I set the path for the loop. I hope you can see this. Imagine with me a race car drivers rolling on the course, and every time they get to the end of the lane, they make a U-turn. And they ride the straight, and when they get down to the end of the straight, they make another U-turn. And so it's fascinating to me that race car drivers go a long way, but they never get far. And I believe, not you, but maybe somebody on your row is stuck like a race car driver driving in a loop, moving and going fast, but going nowhere fast. Because we're stuck in the loop of our own U-turn. I want to challenge you to get out of that loop U-turn today. When we are living in this fear-based consciousness, one of the things that we do when we're living in a fear-based consciousness is we become weary of change. We become leery of change when we're living in a fear-based consciousness. And this is not a news flash, but the world has changed. Right? 20 years ago, you did not live your life with your computer, your phone, and your camera in your pocket. And you can choose to stay still if you want to, but the world is still moving because the world does not wait for you and I to get our act together. It simply moves because as the world turns, God is doing something wonderful in the turn. See, what we got to know how to do is get in our turn. Des, we were at the shop just Friday, right? And we were talking about this double dutch thing. You ever jump double dutch? When you jump double dutch, there is this part right before you get into the rope where you do this thing right here. What's the name? Just said this too. I just realized she said this too. But when you do double dutch, right? There's this one part where you do this thing right here, right? So the world is moving, the rope is moving, the world is turning. And most of us are trying to catch our rhythm and catch our break and catch when the perfect time, somebody's waiting for the perfect time to get started. Let me give you some news. There will never be a perfect time for you to get started. You just got to jump in, and when you jump in, just start going. But you got to be willing to allow the changes to occur in your life. God is always doing something new through you. If you are to be guided, and listen, I get it. God is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. But in order for you to come into your guided self, you can't stay the same. Because the limitations that we hold, our God self does not hold. And so, because we need to come into our God self, we're always being pulled out of the safe space. It's the same for us as a community of faith. Can I talk to you? It's the same for us as a community of faith. It's the same for many of our businesses. There are a number of Fortune 500 companies that were on the top 100 list in 1935. Very few of those companies are in business today. Why? Because they couldn't evolve and keep up with the change of pace. We have to be able to change in a way that allows us to meet the needs of everybody here and meet the needs of a world that's calling for a ministry who knows what it has to say. Can't be afraid to change, though. Can't be afraid to change. And listen, change is not always comfortable. I don't know if I ever told you, when I was in the marketplace, I ate a bagel every day for breakfast. I did. I'm a routine guy. I like routine. That's why I tripped myself out when I went to the house picnic yesterday. I was out there, Ken. Getting my little bob on. But what I recognized was that in some ways, the experience had moved past me. In some ways, the experience had moved past me. And in some ways, experience is moving past us. It's moving past where we're most comfortable. And so the question then becomes, how do we allow ourselves to be adaptable enough and flexible enough to hear what God is saying He needs us to do in this season so we can make the greatest impact with what we have to offer? There is nobody giving the world what you have. Nobody, nowhere. Nobody that looks like you or sounds like you or has the grasp for what you have to say in the way you have to say it. Nobody, nowhere. And so, don't clap yet. Don't clap yet. Because if you have it and you don't give it at that level, then it's almost like not having it. Are you understanding what I'm saying? Yes. If we're comfortable with it right here, touch somebody close to you. If we're comfortable with it right here, we can develop a small church mentality even though we're in a big church. See, family-style churches like the comfort of the people we know. Churches interested in expanding themselves welcome people who don't look or sound like them. This was not my lesson today, but there's just something else in me. You got to roll with me, walk with me. You walking with me? And so in order for us to really move beyond the limitations of fear consciousness. See, sometimes you can be afraid and not even realize it. Because it's not just how you feel, but it's what you protect. And if you feel the need to protect the chair that you have been sitting in, now, this is a true story. This is a true story. Walk with me. Walk with me. Walk with me. God, listen, you're going to have to bear with me. God is really doing something marvelous with me in this season. And I just don't feel like fake kicking it no more. Like I got to be 1,000% with you, right? It's a true story. Happened in this room. Someone sitting in the wrong seat. And they left their daily inspiration and a hanky or a shawl or something in the wrong place. When they came back, the person had not only moved the shawl, but absconded with the DI. For those of you who are not familiar with the word absconded, that means they like stole. Now they might not have been stealing it, but watch this. They were moving it to make the other person's experience uncomfortable. And I'm okay with you being uncomfortable at church, but I want that discomfort to come from here. In how the lesson moves you out of your comfort space so that you can begin to grow into what you are. I don't want the discomfort to come from when somebody sits next to you and you say to them, they can't sit there. Just a couple weeks ago, we said to somebody, they were sitting in the front row, look, there are open seats right there. There are open seats. If you are a CUT diehard, put your energy, effort, time, money, resources, blood, consciousness into the building of this ministry, I need you to be flexible with me in this season so that we can make room for the people who will continue your legacy. Right? Not change your legacy, but continue it. Right? The legacy of Dr. Coleman is amplified by what we do in these next seasons. Right? It did not stop at 61. You're still here. That's how you know it's not over. You're still here. There is still breath and life and vitality and contribution and commitment in the life of Christ Universal Temple. I'm excited about that. But we cannot turn off and turn away people who have been looking for us because we are afraid and don't know it. We have to be willing to confront the fear and do it anyway. And so I want you to be attached to your seat, but not so much that it's going to move you in a way that's unchristian. Are you with me? Are you with me? Listen, they want to have what you got, and they don't know that they're not supposed to sit where you sit at every week. But nothing says you don't belong like somebody who says to you, you in my seat, you get out of that seat, you don't belong in that seat. So sometimes we can be afraid and not realize it. Sometimes we make excuses. We make excuses for, as a means by which to make our U-turn. Our excuses give us the sense of comfort that says it's okay to go back to where we've come from. I like George Washington Carver's opinion on it. He said 99% of failures are caused from people who have a habit of making excuses. There is no excuse for what it is we have been called to do and you've been called to do. There is nothing that can top you, stop you, or block you if you commit yourself to what you are called to do. What are some excuses that we use? individually, collectively, what are some excuses that we use? I can't. It's too difficult. Yeah. I don't know how. I may not be good enough. I may not be able. I may not have what it takes. When we make excuses, we do so on one of three levels, either in how we think, how we feel, or how we behave. When we feel like we're not able, we have apprehension, we have worry, we have frustration and anger with ourselves, right? But one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is the compassion that comes along with you trying something you've not done before. Who is going to cheer for you when you step out on faith? And if you won't cheer for you, it's irrational and unreasonable to ask somebody else to. But if the people around you see you cheering for yourself, especially when you miss the mark, so you got to know how to pick yourself up and dust yourself off. Because this should not be a surprise to anyone who has tried something that they've never tried before. You are going to miss it on many occasions. You're probably not going to get it the first time out. You might not know everything you need to know in order to be the best that you want to be. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to upset some people. You're going to fall on your face flat, and you're going to look like a fool. But sometimes courage is the small voice that says, I'm going to try it again tomorrow. Because it does take a certain kind of tenacity to work with a peanut over and over and over and over and over again, and to not have it give you the results that you're looking for, but to stumble upon a manifestation. Have you ever stumbled upon the manifestation that said to you, I thought it was that, but now I see that it's this? See, your life is a laboratory. And one of the beautiful things about a laboratory is that you can blow some stuff up without it being a perilous situation. Sometimes the past gets the best of us. I remember one year, I think we got a hold of a bad pot roast. And EB, that thing was delicious. It was good. It went down easy. I think we had it for lunch, had a little bit more for dinner. And Honey, who can burn really, really good, we both started to have this experience. She was in one room, I was in another, trying to bring ourselves back to the wholeness and get rid of anything that was not letting us manifest that wholeness. And whatever it was has stayed with me to this day. We were in the store not long ago. She said, you want to get a pot roast? I said, I don't even want to hear the words pot roast. Because whatever that was, I don't want to experience it ever again. But many of us carry that kind of baggage, right, from the past. As a matter of fact, the Latin word for baggage is impediment. Many of us carry the kind of baggage or impediment that happened in our past that keeps us from having an opportunity to experience a thing again in the present and in the future. So I don't know what your pot roast is, but I imagine you have one. And while it's okay to be confused by a mistake in your past, don't let that place or that mistake become a resting place. See, most of us want to move on from the past, but we tend to go through life recasting new people in the roles of key people. And so we find ourselves experiencing new people, but with old issues. But I want to challenge you and encourage you on this day to, even in your soul consciousness, to not make the U-turn that we often make when we put new people in old roles. If you are attracting to yourself the right people for this right time in this right season, I want to challenge you to give those people an honest shot to show you who they really are. If you're attracting new business opportunities, I want to encourage you to not let what happened in your business 7, 8, 10, 12 years ago, don't let that be the catalyst for what you think business life is supposed to be for you going forward. It's worth noting that Bill Gates was the founder of Trafo Data. Never heard of it? But you heard of Microsoft. Yeah, see, so one failure does not equal a pattern. You should put that in your notes. The last thing I want to encourage you to do is, as you are overcoming your past and refusing to make a U-turn, is watch the words that you say to yourself. Be fully conscious of your self-talk. Speak life to where it is you want to go. Speak words of encouragement to you all the time. Let you know how you really feel about you. And if you don't feel in ways that are healthy, let me encourage you to find some people who know who you really are outside of the stuff you do and say. Because I do believe that there is a new opportunity for you. There is a new way for you. There is a new feeling for you. There is a new thought for you. And it's not back to where you came from. The new avenue that's in front of you has remnants of your past, but it's got God as your future. There is something right now being birthed in you. And you might not see it, you might not hear it, you might not be catching whiff of it, but I submit to you that because God is always doing a new thing, you can't be old if God is doing something new. And so I just want to encourage you on this morning to let you know that it's already all right because it's always been all right. Just don't go back to where you've been. You know what that is. Have the faith and the courage to move full speed ahead and don't make a U-turn back to where you've come from. God bless you.